Now that we're done with the creation of our database as well as our header and our footer, let's now try to code our index .php. Okay, so we'll be using Bootstrap for our front end library. Okay, so let me just try to start first. We have here div class container fluid div. This will actually serve this part will actually serve as our header. So this will contain possibly the image that we will be using. So div class call sm12 text center. Now, why is it that we only have here 12? Basically, in Bootstrap, the maximum column width is 12. That's why we only have 12 here. Okay, so next is our set to create another row, div class row. Now, let's try to add a border on top. Okay, let's try to add a gap in on top. So we will be using empty dash 3. Okay, that's actually for our gap on top. So to create another row, div class row. Now this time what we need to do is we need to create our search bar, because usually for a shopping cart there should always be a search bar. So we're going to create our search bar. So div class, we'll call this one as our input group. Then we have your input type search class form control rounded. Okay, then say to add our button type button class button outline primary. Then we have search. Then let's try to close. Okay, so let's try to see this time what the output is. Try to minimize. So this is our search bar on top. So this is actually our search bar already, as you've noticed or as you've seen. Now, what we need to also need to do next is we need to create a login. Okay, let me just try to minimize first. So you can clearly see it. Okay. So the next is let's try to create our login screen or login panel. Okay, which will be located on our sidebar. Um, so let's try to add another row. Div class row. Okay. Div class call sm12. So this will actually serve as our menu. Okay, we will be using again include. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to create a file. Okay, cancel. Okay, I'm going to create a new file, save, click file, then save as. Okay, I'm going to call this one as main navigation.php. Okay, I already have my main navigation. So this is going to be under index. I'm going to include also. Oh, include main navigation.php. Okay, so what this does is this is where we're going to add all of our navigation. So let's say let's try to add our home ahref index.php. So we have our home. Okay. Let's try to create another one. We have there registration, register here. Okay. Going to minimize and I'm going to reload. Let's try to see. Okay, we have it here our home and our registration. So notice by the way that for registration it's still black. We'll add some code on it later. Okay. So next let's go back to our uh, index file. Now let's say for example we wanted to add this one at the end. So maybe we can type text end. Let's try to see what will happen. So it's going to be added here. Okay, so we try to move the text or the links from the left hand side to the right hand side by adding text dash end. Okay, so let's try to add another row. Basically just copy and paste. Uh-huh. Into add here empty 3. Okay, so instead of 12, okay, we're going to write it here 9. Make it 2. Then make it 9, I mean. Then make it not make it 10. Okay, then you have there 2. Okay, another feature that we can use in a bootstrap is called cards. Okay, so let me just try to show you what a card looks like. So we have here div class card. Okay, so we have there card header. Okay, then we have here div class card body. Okay, so for the card body, that's where the contents of our um, login page will be placed. Okay, so let me just try to get this first. Okay, div class input group. Site use first label. So also to add placeholder. Since you use email, set to use email address. Then next we have our password. Okay, so let's try to check the output. So this one. Okay, so there's some an error. Okay, so we need actually to put it below. So how do we do that? So I have to create another input group. Let me just try to delete this part as well as this part. Okay, so this time to view. So we have this one. Okay, so there's an error actually, but we were able to display it like that. So what we wanted to do basically is we wanted to put the email address on top of our form. So how are we going to do that? Okay, so instead of using input group, let's try to use this time form group. Since basically we're trying to group our forms. So reload. Okay, so that's it. So we have our email address and our password. But let's try to add a little bit of spacing in between the email address and the password. Okay, let's try to open our code. In order for you to add, by the way, you have their py. Then we don't need to use py, by the way. Try to copy. So this will serve as our button this time. So the last form will serve as our button. So you have there a form group, then uh, button class, button, primary, button, lock, login. Okay. So this is what it looks like. Let's try to reload the page. So we have here our login. But again, we wanted to add spacing in between. So let's try to add this code. py3. So basically, we talk about py3. That's the gap in between. That's actually the spacing in between elements. Okay. So okay. Notice by the way that there's already a space in between. So let's say we wanted to add site to have it here also. py3. There. Okay. Make it this one 2. Maybe I'll try to make it 1. Okay. So next is let's try to put a label here on our login form. This is our card header, and we have MX6. Then we have here login existing account. Then there. So that's how we would create our login form. But let's also try to finish our registration. So um, for our registration, what we can basically do is just try to copy this whole section. Okay, try to put it here. Then let's just try to add some fields. Go back here. Okay, I'm on registration. By the way, notice by the way on my address bar that I'm already on registration. Okay, so let's try to change this one. Uh, Register new account. So you have their email, then password. Let's try to limit it. It's time for a few fields. Okay, then you have their first name, last name, then contact number. Okay, so password. Okay, so their first name, last name, and contact number. Okay, so this is all of our code. So basically I added first name, last name, and contact number. Okay, so let me just try to reload the page. Notice by the way that I retained the search bar here, because actually it will still we will still be displaying the certain informations here. Okay, but okay, let's try to adjust our code. py3. Okay, what if, okay, let's try to look for index. Let's try to remove this part. Okay, try to reload the page again. So that's it. Make this one 2. Okay. So let's also try to go back to our index. Okay, home. Okay, then let's also try to remove our py3 because there's too much gap in between. Okay, so that's it. So this is okay, so you have your home and registration. So this is, by the way, already our index and our registration form for our shopping cart.